Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alphabetical Fugazi, the only podcast that devotes an episode each to discussing every song in the band's catalog, from Fuga to Fugazi. I'm your host, Ian James Wright, and joining me today to discuss BreakIn from the 1989 Three Songs EP is James Vitatoe, a longtime fan and musician who has a very interesting little cameo in Fugazi history. How's it going, James?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Before we jump into talking about you and Fugazi and your very interesting little step into the spotlight, I wanted to talk to our listeners and tell them that we had discussed between us how for this song BreakIn it might be better to have a female guest's perspective on the song. That just didn't come together in time to record this episode. I'd actually love to have more diversity in guests on this podcast, to what extent that's possible. So maybe you, the listener, can help with that. So just to be totally transparent about how I get guests to be on this show, it's basically just two ways, right? One, I try to get in contact with people who have worked with Fugazi or done some kind of project involving them or written about them intelligently, or simply people that I know personally who are fans of theirs. And the second way is that people who listen to this podcast sometimes get in touch with me and say, hey, I'd like to be a guest, or hey, I know someone who would be a good guest. So my theory was that I would get this podcast started and some people would be psyched about it and share it with other people, and that would just naturally generate enough guests to get me through the whole project, which will be like almost 100 episodes. And to some extent that has worked so far, and I wanted to thank the people who, or the listeners to the show who have expressed interest in being a guest. Although, I am always a little nervous that I'll run behind schedule because I can't find a guest. And just this whole way of doing things has mostly resulted in the guests being white men, which, maybe we have to be realistic about the demographics of the majority of people who are big fans of Fugazi. Or, maybe it's also that white men are more socialized to think, hey, everyone cares what I have to say, and they're not so self-conscious about jabbering away on a podcast. But either way, I can certainly assure you that I'm not turning away women or people of color who want to be guests. But maybe if you guys could help me grow the podcast a little bit, it would result in a bigger and more diverse pool of guests for me to draw from. Again, I don't monetize this podcast. Really, the only interest I have in getting more listeners is that it will actually make it easier for me to get the project done. So there are a few ways to help me with that, if you are so inclined. One is you can rate the podcast, which apparently gives it more visibility, or so I understand. So if you're in Apple Podcasts, all you have to do if you're listening on Apple Podcasts is look at the screen of the episode you're listening to right now. You tap the three little dots in the bottom right of the screen, tap Go to Show, and you just scroll down past the episode list to ratings and reviews, and just there's 5 stars, just tap the star rating that you'd like to give. I suggest 5 stars, but that's just my bias. If you'd also like to write a review while you're there, that's probably even more helpful, but really just a simple rating, tap on the number of stars, that would be great. Second, please tell your friends. If you know anyone at all who likes Fugazi, maybe just send them a quick text with a link to the show. That would be awesome. And of course, finally, if you want to be a guest, don't hesitate to email me. I've already recorded several episodes with people who are just listeners, and I think they've been really great. You don't have to be nervous, as I was just saying to James here, that you'll say something really dumb or that there will be awkward pauses. It happens all the time. I'm pretty good at editing that stuff out. I really love talking with people about this band, and I do not care if they're notable musicians or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, this is a podcast by the people, for the people. So yeah, that email address, as always, is fugaziatoz@gmail.com. Okay, thanks in advance for doing that, and thank you for listening, and on with the show with my guest, James. So, with that all said, James, thanks for being here. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Fugazi and how you got started listening to them?
Sure. I began my Fugazi story, I was in middle school. Where I lived, middle school was 7th through 9th grade. And right in the middle, in 8th grade, I started gravitating from heavy metal to punk rock. This was 1988. And I had a friend who had recently moved to this area from D.C., and he was a Minor Threat fan. And he played Minor Threat for me, and I was like, wow, I love this. Minor Threat became a huge impact on me. And, at the time I was changing from bands like Metallica and stuff like that to, punk rock, Ramones, Minor Threat. And then a big band was Minutemen. I fell in love with Minutemen around, 1989. And so I had a friend who was a little bit older, had said, "Have you heard Ian's new band?" That's how they were introduced to me, and he played me the Margin Walker tape. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is like Minor Threat, but meets Minutemen, and I was instantly taken by it. And then over the course of the next, couple of years, I just got more and more into Fugazi to where they were, essentially my favorite band. I got into Fugazi in say around 89, fall of 89. Repeater was the first record I remember coming out, the first one I pre-ordered was Steady Diet of Nothing. But I didn't get to see Fugazi live until 1993 on the Killtaker tour. They actually played, I'm from Kentucky, and they played Lexington, Kentucky in 1991. And my interesting story about that was I knew about the show in Cincinnati, but I didn't know about the one in Lexington. And at the time I was 15, and I was hoping somebody would drive me to this Fugazi show in Cincinnati. And the person who said that he would take me ended up going to the Lexington show and the Cincinnati show and didn't take me at all. So I was, needless to say, I was very upset. But I look back on that and I kind of am thankful I didn't see Fugazi at 15 because I was still very much, in the more hardcore, more punk rock mindset. I probably would have been one of the people that Ian would be calling down. So I was thankful that I was able to wait until I was a little bit older. I was 18 when I saw Fugazi in 93. And that first Fugazi show was just like life-changing. It was incredible. I remember the moment they came out, the song that opened. I saw Fugazi, I don't even know, several dozen times throughout the run. My only regret is I didn't see them more. I wish I could have, if it was one of those things where you would catch Fugazi shows and you just thought there would always be Fugazi shows. And then all of a sudden there wasn't Fugazi shows.
That's so true. Have you looked up in the Fugazi live series archive if they have that first show that you saw them at?
Oh yeah, it's there. And it was one of the first ones I purchased when that became available because it was a monumental show. And actually, before we recorded, I listened to the Lexington show that I missed. Fugazi Live was just a powerhouse. It was, they were phenomenal.
So in the course of going to see Fugazi live, I assume that's where you had a run-in with Jem Cohen, I guess? Well,
all right. So I saw Fugazi in 93, and, we hung around outside after the venue. Like when we pulled up, this is kind of funny. We pulled up, we parked behind the venue, and we actually saw them walking. And, me and my friends were like, we started following Fugazi. And we like followed them up to the corner, and then they left. They veered right to go get something to eat, and we were like, all right, we can't do this. We can't stalk them. We've got to go get. So after the show, we went around back to meet them, and they remembered, oh, you're the kids that were following us. Thank you for letting us eat. Peace. And we're like, all right, yeah. So and from the first moment we met them, they were super friendly. Very open, very, just welcoming people. And then I saw Fugazi probably about 3 more times before the show that Jem Cohen was at. That was in Knoxville in 1996. And what happened there was, we pulled up, we were in the parking lot, and I see a guy filming train tracks. And he looked like he had a pretty professional camera, and I say, to my wife, Mary, who's in the film with me, I bet that's Jem Cohen. And as he came walking through, I called out to him. I was like, hey, are you Jem Cohen? And he's like, yeah. And he kind of just seemed shocked somebody would know his name. And, then we just started talking. And as we started talking, he lifted up his camera and started filming and ended up filming about 20 minutes, I'm told, of footage of us just rambling on about how much we love Fugazi. And he would ask us questions. Like the question that made it into the film was, do you read Fugazi's lyrics? And the answer is, of course. And and that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fugazi are incredible lyricists. They're very poetic, but they're also, they both Ian and Ghee and even Joe, they have a way of saying things in very simple words, but that are very profound and could have a lot of meaning. But sometimes, but then again, they have lyrics that are just straight ahead, more general. I don't know how I'm trying to describe that, but Fugazi is very, Fugazi are just phenomenal lyricists. And so the question of, do you pay attention to their lyrics? Of course. I think anybody who takes Fugazi seriously must, take the lyrics, read the lyrics, and I think there's a lot of enigma in some of the lyrics. And again, that's what makes this podcast so great, is diving into the words and figuring out, what are they exactly referring to? Is it as simple as it seems, or is there more going on underneath? So we ended up at that show. It was a pretty chaotic, violent show. Probably one of the worst audience experiences I've ever had at any show. And we ended up on stage during. They were pulling people from the front up because they were getting crushed, and we, along with some other people, ended up sitting at the side of the stage for the rest of the concert. And it was just a phenomenal experience to have, to see your favorite band, right in front of you, full force. It was just beautiful. And all that got captured into the film. And one of the great things about the Knoxville show and Instrument is my wife quotes the lyric from Promises about touch your hand to the wall at night. And they named that Knoxville section of the film after what she said. And that was a very touching moment to when they did that. I was like, I couldn't believe it. But that also changed our relationship with the band. I mean, for the first few shows we saw, we were fans and they were cordial. But after they decided to put us in the film, they would call us family. And I don't know, we were very welcomed, and we ended up seeing Fugazi quite a few times after that, as often as we could, as life permits. A big thing was going to D.C. to see Fort Reno show. You had to do that.
Yeah.
Fort Reno shows were in particular. But like I said, I just wish I'd seen more. Just I'm thankful I got to see what I got to see.
Absolutely, same here. And that part of that's online, right? That part of Instrument that you're featured in.
Yeah.
You'll have to send me the link later. I was trying to look for it again. I couldn't find it, but I'll put that in the show notes so fans can revisit it. Yeah, that's such an amazing experience. Out of curiosity, I was wondering. I don't think I was aware of Jem Cohen until the point when Instrument was released. How did you know of him before that?
I hadn't seen the film, but I knew he donated the word "Glue Man" to the song. I think that's mentioned in the liner notes of the record. He had done I'd seen his name in graphics, and then I can't remember exactly how, but I knew that he had done video work, and I'd written to Discord, and Amy had sent me a catalog. He had a company called, at the time, I think it was called C100 Film, and he had done a lot of work with, he'd done the Fugazi Glue Man, and he had done a lot of work with REM, and he had some other movies that you could order, like VHS tapes. I mean, this was 1990, whatever. And somewhere I still probably have that catalog. I didn't order any, but I guess I'd inquired about the Glue Man video, and so she had sent that to me. But interesting related to this song and Jem Cohen is Jem Cohen, and we'll get to all this, but he did the graphics for the original release of this song when it was the Sub Pop single.
Yeah, so let's start talking about it. So BreakIn,
okay.
This is the first song that we've covered in this podcast from the 3 songs EP, which, I mean, I for one first encountered it as bundled with Repeater on CD.
As did I. That's the first way I've ever heard it was
right.
On the CD.
That's probably most people how they've heard these songs for the first time. But it was originally released before Repeater came out. It was released in 1989 through, as you said, Sub Pop Records. It was like a collector's edition of 2,000 copies. This was part of Sub Pop's Singles Club. It had different cover art, as you've described. Very shortly after that, it was re-released on Discord with different cover art, and then after that, packaged with Repeater on CD. I was actually not sure why it was originally released through Sub Pop. This is, Fugazi's, all of their releases are so closely associated with Discord.
Right.
Yeah, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've actually talked to Brendan about that before. And at the time, there was a lot of respect, mutual respect between Discord, DC, Fugazi, and bands and labels in the Pacific Northwest, in particular, like K Records and Olympia, and then Sub Pop in Seattle. And Sub Pop had started their Loser Club singles series, where they got a bunch of bands that weren't necessarily on Sub Pop to be a part of this singles only release. People would, it was a limited edition membership to be a Sub Pop loser, and you would get a 7-inch every month in the mail from Sub Pop. So they had asked Fugazi to be a part, and Fugazi, felt honored and obliged. And in doing so, Fugazi is very egalitarian. And the idea of something that's limited and exclusive is not necessarily in keeping with the Fugazi tradition, let's say. So the idea was that Sub Pop would have a version and have it out first to their club members, but then Discord would make it permanently available through Discord and the 3-song 7-inch. And like you said, it eventually got bundled with Repeater. I first bought Repeater on cassette in 1990, and then later that year I picked up the CD because I noticed it had 3 songs I didn't have. I was like, oh, I want that, but listening to it, once you get used to Repeater as a record, and this happens on several of the Discord releases on CD where they add the singles, you want the record to end where it ended. Yeah. And when it rolls into that next song, sometimes it's off-putting. But, I'm thankful they did it because it made me aware that these 3 songs existed. And eventually I did buy the single. And then several years later, I was fortunate enough to stumble across one of the Sub Pop editions, and I bought that,
That's so true what you say, especially because Shut the Door is such an amazing way to end a CD or a record.
It's a phenomenal album closer. One of the, top tier Fugazi songs,
Yeah, I often think it's a shame, especially sometimes they'll re-release a classic album remastered or whatever, but then they'll also include bonus tracks on the end. And I almost always hate that. I'm like, I want it to end with a song that I know that the record ends with, and then I want there to be silence, And so it's good that I never had experienced Repeater before I got it on CD with the 3 songs addended to it. So I never really minded in that case, but I can definitely see how somebody might feel that way encountering this package that way. Speaking of releases, I should mention, in case I forget, that this song is also on the first demo release. So those of you Fugazi fans who haven't checked that out yet should seek it out. It's very faithful to the version that ended up on the 3 songs EP. They're minor differences, but it's really all there. But definitely worth the comparison. So as far as the song goes, BreakIn, did you want to have the first word on this? What's the first angle we should take on this?
BreakIn, to me, is a pretty cut and dry song. I think the lyrically is pretty clear. It's I described it as a consensual relationship gone awry. And how it goes awry, I see it in 2 different ways, but it's pretty clear. It's about a sexual relationship that goes wrong.
This is probably one of mankind's oldest stories, don't you think?
Right. Yes.
There's love that ends up in an unwanted teen pregnancy, it seems.
It could be a teen pregnancy. It's it starts out, he's happy because she's got skin, and she's happy just to let him in. When he asks, "Will you let me in?" and from a place where they share skin, they say, "Come inside." It's definitely people have started a romantic relationship. It's and I think that verse is clearly consensual. Everybody's happy, but there comes a time when the skin wears thin, and she's working on another skin deep inside. So what is the skin deep inside? To me, I think part of it is the answer is in the title, BreakIn. What is a break-in? You're forced entry. So is the song about rape? I think that's one way to look at it. A lot of people think it's about the other skin deep inside is a child. Like, is there has this sexual relationship resulted in a child, and is it potentially an abortion? And so I kind of see this in like the thematically, to put it in Fugazi speak, somewhere between suggestion and reclamation. This is it kind of in keeping to some of the other lyrical themes about Fugazi. And that's one of the things I love about Fugazi. I was actually talking to a friend earlier about this, that Fugazi boldly go into, and you mentioned this at the top of the show. This is a subject, relating to women and women's bodies being autonomous and women being in control of their bodies. And Fugazi was at the forefront of being a male voice speaking for women. He's a very pro-feminist, they wrote pro-feminist songs. Whether or not they want to use the word feminist, I'll leave that for them. I don't know if I've ever heard them say that, but it's clear that, Fugazi are egalitarian. Early on, they're speaking out on, gay rights, women's rights, racial issues. And you look, the charities they supported, what is it, Walker Reed?
Oh, Whitman Walker.
Thank you. Yes. Fugazi are known for their politics, but they wrote about, they wrote about it too.
Yeah, so. It's so interesting, like, to bring up suggestion. I'd guess most people who have looked at Fugazi lyrics carefully notice there's some interesting parallels there, right? It's
almost the exact same words.
Yeah, right? The image of talking about skin and entering the skin as as a way of talking about sex. It happens in both songs. It's interesting because one is a Ghee song and one is an Ian song. And so I guess, one is borrowing from the other. It is sort of a creepy way of writing about sex, which is like a classic sort of Ghee thing where he makes you feel uncomfortable about bodily
It's
issues.
Utilitarian.
Yeah, it's very Silence of the Lambs in a way.
I can see that. But Ghee has, you look at songs like Latin Roots, where, it's, this is your parents' bed. It's a great place to be laid. He's very blunt about this in a way, but like you said, it's in a stark way. He's not afraid to mince words. They're punk rock. And this is a very punk rock song. It's one of the most hardcore-esque Fugazi songs. It just comes in out of the gate, blistering.
Absolutely. So I was going to say it almost sounds a little generic. Like, it doesn't have much of the Fugazi hallmarks, except, of course, from Ghee's distinctive vocals, which really elevate this song. Also the way the Ghee and Ian interplay, that's a phenomenal trait in Fugazi songs when they trade off. And the way that, Ghee's voice is so on, but then you got Ian coming in with the break-in, Yeah, that's a nice interlude. And speaking of Ghee's delivery, I had to give it up for just the delivery of the final word of the song when he sings covering is amazing. Like, that,
yeah.
What an amazing way to sing that word.
It just says it all. But that last verse, I think that's the key to this song. And I think it also ties into other Fugazi songs, other things they were thinking about. He wonders, will my money, will it cover for me? Can I stay outside and let it cover for me? She can't get outside. She's the covering. And if you think about, the sex act, the woman's the covering, she's being entered, the break-in, the covering. It paints a really clear picture in simple words, but to me, it's poetic.
Yeah, you mentioned the title line before. That's the line for me that always gave me trouble, because I agree. Like, it does seem like it's about just a consensual sexual relationship, but simply the title line "BreakIn." I'm like, well, what does that mean? It is a bit rapey, and
my thinking on it is, I look at that line. She's working on another skin deep inside. That maybe the woman has grown tired of the relationship. She's not as interested, and so she's moved on. She's found someone else to that she's interested in, and the male has it resulted in a forced rape, and that the break-in is his rejection of her trying to leave him. So he's raped this woman because you can't leave me, so I'm going to do this to you. Which is what rape is. It's a power. It's a way to assert power over someone, and so that's the break-in. And then the person has their money to they're wealthy enough. There's been many cases in the media where people of wealth rape or have horrendous crimes, but they have very light sentences because they have the money to hire the right lawyer, or they have such an upstanding, quote unquote reputation in the community. They get by with, the crimes they've committed. Wealth and the power and privilege that comes with wealth was something that Fugazi was very keenly aware of, and they wrote about.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that, the song presents a little story. It's not explicit about how the speaker feels about that story, right? I think if there is a statement here, it's about the unequal footing of a man and woman in this situation, right? The man who, right. At least if he does have money, he can relatively easily separate himself from the relationship, either, right. Paying for an abortion, paying child support, right. whatever, but the woman cannot simply step away. It's not that simple. So in that way, even though it's not explicitly pro-choice or making a statement like that, it is sympathetic to women and implicitly says right. to me that men should allow women the latitude of choosing for themselves because they're more involved in it in a more intimate way, and they can't simply step away.
I agree with that. I think that's true.
I should say before I forget also that I had read elsewhere, there's a book called Dance of Days by Mark Anderson
right.
and Mark Jenkins.
Yeah.
A little snippet from that I thought was interesting, where it describes a show where Ian introduced this song as, quote, about teen pregnancy, but then in an interview afterward with the fanzine Nomadic Underground, Ghee clarified that he said, quote, when Ian said BreakIn was about teenage pregnancy, he probably should have said, this could be about teenage pregnancy, because it could be about a lot of things. It certainly means a lot of different things to me. So I thought that was very interesting, and we should just have that proviso as we continue to talk about this, because I personally am not sure what else it would be about, but apparently there are some other possibilities floating out there.
An interesting aside to this is, and I'd mentioned this to you when we first started talking, in 1998, I was in a college. I went to a college in Kentucky that's a small liberal arts college. It was founded in 1855 as an abolitionist college. It was one of the first colleges in America, or I think it was the first college that was integrated. And when I went there, it's known for tuition free. You work on campus, and all your education's paid for. And it's called Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. And if people want to look it up, it's a phenomenal college. But anyway, the point was I took a women's studies course my senior year, and I did a zine about men in punk rock and pro-feminist thought in punk rock. And I actually tried to interview Ghee about this song, and I also tried to talk about suggestion and what was the other one? Reclamation. But anyway, in Ghee is so I've never encountered anyone who least likes to talk about their lyrics. I went back and I hunted that down because I thought, it'll give me some kind of insight. I can't remember. I remember talking to Ghee, but I can't remember what he said. And then when I looked it up, it was like, he didn't say anything. He left it up for he says his statement was he felt like the listener could interpret the meaning from the lyrics. And I think that's very typical Ghee. He does not, he doesn't like to divulge. So like your statement from, about him saying it could have other meanings, I think that's very, Ian's a little bit more open to talk about what a song might be about, though he likes to mesh different ideas into one song. But to me, I think the lyrics are pretty clear. It's, like I said, a consensual relationship gone awry. I did do some research into seeing when this song premiered live. And I don't know if you're ready to talk about that or not, but
yeah, what did you find out?
So, all right. So BreakIn was first debuted in Washington, D.C. on October 16th in 1987. It's a show where Fugazi opens for King Face. It's Ghee's first vocal solo performance of anything. So this song is his entry into Fugazi. It was their fifth show. Really early on. Their first show was September of '87. So you're a little over a month away, and he's debuting his first lead vocal. I was wondering if there was any kind of build up to the song. So I went and listened to the show, and of course nothing. It's just jumps right in. But I found it interesting that the song is 1 minute and 33 seconds long. And I looked up how often Fugazi played BreakIn live, and it was exactly 133 times on the current Fugazi Live series. Now, there's some shows not on there, so there's probably played a few more times. But I thought it was a great coincidence that 133 times, and the song's 1 minute and 33 seconds. I thought that was a nice little aside. And interestingly, it was on the set list of the final Fugazi show at the Forum in London in November of 2002. They played it. Again, no introduction. They just go straight into it. But, the performance of the song, like you mentioned on the demo, it's pretty much set right out. To me, it's almost like a hardcore song. It's, it was obviously very set. It reminds me of some of the early Fugazi songs, like Turn Off Your Guns or In Defense of Humans. But those songs tended to fade away. Turn Off Your Guns was played several times early on, but just kind of disappeared from the set. In Defense of Humans wasn't played all that often. But this song, held on all throughout the run. I mean, it was played the fifth show and played at the last show. So it obviously had the band liked it.
Yeah. I did find a relevant interview with Ghee on Pitchfork where he talks about this. He says, Ian was the main voice when the band first started, but I think the idea was that it would be kind of loose, and that was the spirit in which they asked me to be kind of in the band a little bit. Like, I ended up singing the song BreakIn with them singing lead, and then there's almost kind of this Flavor Flav role where I would sing backups and kind of just fuck around on stage. And the interviewer asks, BreakIn, was that early? And he says, yeah, BreakIn was really early. At a certain point, our sound guy, Joey P., took me aside and said, look, if you're going to be in this band, develop your role or get serious about it to some degree. So there's a little shout out. That's a name that you'll see if you peruse a lot of the Fugazi Live archive. Joey Picuri. Not sure exactly how you pronounce it, but yeah, apparently he really encouraged Ghee in those early days to step up, sing lead, and I guess that resulted in this early song. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, good for him. Because Ghee was phenomenal in those early shows. Ian, well, even early on, Ian had this idea of the band being fluid, that people would come in and out. They'd have people sit in with them for a song or two, and then at the end, Jerry Boucher joined the band on live and recording. But Ghee was just kind of like that. He was kind of just like there as a hype man. And then this song kind of changed that. And of course, Repeater changed it. He picks up the guitar and starts playing more. And
to go back to something we were talking about earlier, which is the talking about sex in terms of sharing skin, right? The line from a place where they share skin. This seemed to me reminiscent of Platos Symposium
I read some, but it's been a long time.
So to recap for listeners who for whom it's been a long time or who never read it, this is I guess they describe it as a dialogue, but really it's a series of speeches almost, where it's set in ancient Greece with some real characters who really lived. It's sort of a drinking party where each person in attendance is asked to give a speech in praise of love. And one of the people there is Aristophanes, the playwright, and his little segment of it is almost like a satirical fable. He relates the story of how primeval people were once kind of like two conjoined people, 2 faces and 4 hands and feet, etc. And they were really powerful, and they represented a threat to the gods. So Zeus decided to cut them all in half. So relevant quotation here says, "After the division, the 2 parts of man, each desiring his other half, came together, and throwing their arms about one another, entwined in mutual embraces, longing to grow into one. They were on the point of dying from hunger and self-neglect, because they did not like to do anything apart. And when one of the halves died, and the other survived, the survivor sought another mate, man or woman as we call them, being the sections of entire men or women, and clung to that. They were being destroyed when Zeus, in pity of them, invented a new plan. He turned the parts of generation round to the front, for this had not always been their position, and they sowed the seed no longer as hitherto like grasshoppers in the ground, but in one another. And after the transposition, the male generated in the female, in order that by the mutual embraces of man and woman they might breed, and the race might continue. Or if man came to man, they might be satisfied and rest, and go their ways to the business of life. So ancient is the desire of one another which is implanted in us, reuniting our original nature, making one of 2, and healing the state of man." So there you go, sharing skin in ancient Greek philosophy.
That's 100% sharing skin. That's beautiful. I think that totally ties in. And who knows? Maybe Ghee had that in mind.
Maybe. Partially, when I was thinking about what he's doing and writing the song, I started to notice that it's almost like he's playing a game with the lyrics here, where he's trying to get as much mileage as possible out of a few words. So you notice there are a lot of words in the song that are used in multiple ways in different places in the song. So skin is one that's used a lot, right? Skin represents, maybe in the first line, she's got skin, maybe it represents her attractiveness. Then from a place where they share skin, it's representing sexual intercourse. And then, of course, she's working on another skin deep inside. We already theorized that could be talking about that she's pregnant and generating a fetus. There's a time when the skin wears thin. That's a line that, to say somebody is thin-skinned can mean that they are short-tempered. I also had a theory that this was a line that could be referring to a condom breaking. A condom sometimes referred to as a lambskin. So that could be what resulted in the pregnancy here. So et cetera, et cetera. There's so many ways that skin is used. Let's see, another one like that is there is this inside-outside duality that's used a lot, right? The male wonders, can I stay outside and let my money cover for me? Whereas the woman can't get outside. And, in the beginning, there's a rather explicit line, come inside, which... Right.
Come inside. Well, I mean, it's a welcoming. It's like, come on in.
Yeah. It could be a welcoming line. It could be a more explicit sexual line. I don't know. It's a little uncomfortable. Right. But it's just another way to emphasize that repetition.
The way he is. Yeah.
Also, the word...
come inside deep in... Well, I was going to say, come inside deep inside. Yeah. Stay outside. Get outside. Yeah.
The word cover is also used a couple of different ways. He's wondering if his money will cover for him, whereas the woman, she is the covering, like a more literal covering of the fetus, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of my theory of Ghee writing the song. He's like, let me see how many different ways I can use these common words and have it form an interesting, cohesive story.
I think that's a very Ghee thing to do because he loves wordplay. Did I mention that Jim Cohen did the cover for the Sub Pop? Did I mention that?
Oh, you mentioned it, but we forgot to elaborate on it. Do you have anything more to say about that?
Well, not a whole. Well, the cover is rather interesting for both Sub Pop and Fugazi. It's a sleeve of vellum printed over top of like a beige insert with the lyrics letterpressed onto the sleeve or the jacket for the 7-inch. I don't know. Jim was very involved in. He's the reason Fugazi covers got very interesting. If it wasn't for him, they might have all looked like 13 songs. Fugazi was very intent on the music. I mean, Fugazi, to me, there's on the end hits, there's committed to excellence. Fugazi were absolutely committed to excellence.
Right.
And they pushed things, but their focus was on the music, on the songwriting, on the shows, and the graphic end of it wasn't necessarily in their wheelhouse, maybe. Ian had always had Jeff Nelson at Discord to be the phenomenon of, all the graphic stuff. And so with Fugazi, it's Jim Cohen who was pushing them forward, and he did it in on the Kill Takers graphics. And in many ways, he was like a fifth, or, they had several fifth members of the band, but he was definitely, very instrumental in getting them going.
Aha, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Speaking of that cover, that first Sub Pop cover, it's really weird. It's four sketches of four people's heads. Mm-hmm. They do not appear to be the members of Fugazi.
They're not Fugazi. No, they're not Fugazi.
Looks like one of them is a woman, I think.
The one is clearly a woman.
I'm not sure what it's supposed to represent.
I don't know. When you peel back the vellum on the actual printing, there are pictures kind of superimposed in these little circles. And even though you can't really make them out, there's one, and the bottom left, to me, clearly is a silhouette of Ghee. And I think behind the little hand-drawn faces on the vellum is negative images of Fugazi members.
Yeah, I can almost see that. If you have a more a clear image of that, maybe you could send it to me, and I'll share it with the listeners somehow.
I don't know what they were. I mean, I do know that they were very honored to be asked to be a part of the Sub Pop series. A lot of bands that they liked and felt like camaraderie with had already were participating. It was it was like the Christmas edition. So Sub Pop, it was the final one of the year. So obviously Sub Pop was very pleased, to have Fugazi on board, to be their final and also their holiday edition, and I could only imagine being a Sub Pop single club member in, your final one, you're getting Fugazi and, 3 new songs from Fugazi. I mean, it's got to be amazing.
Well, let's talk about ratings then.
Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me?
So you've heard the show. We ask our guests to assign a rating to this song, just relative to the rest of the Fugazi catalog, which is, of course, above all other music. So
right.
even a poor Fugazi rating is a pretty good rating overall. But what do you think you would give BreakIn?
I've been thinking about this a lot because, as you said, Fugazi songs are heads and tails above most songs. And I found it very interesting listening to your show what people will venture as their least favorite Fugazi songs. And I'm shocked when they are like some of my favorite songs. But as in the Fugazi canon, I find it very hard to give anything a 1 or a 2. But that being said, I feel like BreakIn is kind of it's just a middle of the road song. It doesn't have anything with it that would elevate it up into the upper echelon, but the band clearly loved it. They played it a ton of times. So I'm going to give it a solid 3. I think it's a good song. But it's not one of the ones I would tell people to come, hey, check out, if you want to listen to Fugazi, there's other songs I would recommend first,
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I was never Fugazi for me. The side of them that was hardcore punk was never really the draw for me. That wasn't my favorite stuff about them. So yeah, that's my personal bias. So all the songs that are like this, even when they're done well, the songs you mentioned before, Great Cop, et cetera, all the other hardcore songs, they're just never going to be top tier for me. Although, as I said, this is a well done example of it. I do again love Ghee's vocal, especially at the very end. It has great value. Also, as just this early artifact of Fugazi.
The way the song closes is what elevated it up for me. It's such a great end of a song that I'm like, well, I can't give it a 1 or a 2. It's got that ending. Yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, all things considered, I'll go 2.5. Pretty close.
I
but
understand that.
Yeah.
All right, for reference, because people have been mentioning like a song that took me a while to like for Fugazi, one that didn't instantly grow on me was "Floating Boy." I heard "Floating Boy" for the first time live and didn't really, it was kind of seemed meandering at first. Like I didn't know it. It was presented in a live setting, and then when I did hear it on record, it just took a while for that song to grow on me. And of all the Fugazi songs, that would be like my lowest tier. But even then, I don't know if I could give it a 1 star.
So for further reference, what's a song that you might give 5 stars for Fugazi?
Oh man, there's so many. Like. Well, "Shut the Door" is top tier. Early stuff. There's songs I still listen to. I've heard thousands of times that give me goosebumps. "Give Me the Cure" or "Suggestion," or even I love like "Cash Out" or "Epic Problem" when it kicks into the rocking part. I'm right there with them. I'm like, yes, this is.
Well, James, let me give you a chance to do some plugs. Where can listeners reach you? Do you have projects coming up, stuff you're into? What should we check out?
Well, if people are interested, I'm on social media. All my social media, for the most part, is under Vita Viva, which is actually a Fugazi reference. People ask me all the time, where does that come from? And it comes from Life and Limb. They don't say Vita Viva, but my name is Vitatoe, and Vita is life, and Viva, 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 I just turned it into Vita Viva. But I'm on, social media as Vita Viva. I do graphic design work if people are interested, and I also play in a band called Verstärker. We've got a record out. We were actually working on another record, but this year is kind of, set everything aside. Plans were all halted. So hopefully that we get back to. Back into the saddle and get going. But we're on Bandcamp or all the streaming services. We had a record called Activitate. And actually our last show was playing with Brendan and Joe in Aesthetics in Lexington, Kentucky. So, hopefully, things improve, this virus gets defeated, and we can all get back to playing music, and hopefully venues survive. And, I'm excited about the possibility of seeing a Ko-Riki show, more Aesthetics music, see what everybody's working on. And then hopefully, the band I'm in will be able to do what we were planning on doing maybe in 2021,
Yeah, that's great. Did you have a chance to talk to Brendan and Joe? Did they remember you from the Fugazi days?
Oh yeah. Fugazi ended in 2002, and I didn't see. I did a show with Joe in 2005 in Lexington, Kentucky, and got to hang out with him. But I didn't see Brendan again until Aesthetics started touring, and then since that time period, I've probably I've been able to see Aesthetics 4 or 5 times. Saw the MC50 a couple times. So yeah, Brendan did not. Joe remembered me instantly, but we'd seen each other in the interim. Brendan had a moment where he's like, "You look so familiar," and then I was like, "But I'd aged. From 2002 till when did they start? 2018, I think. It'd been several years. I'd put on some weight, my hair had thinned.
Time makes fools of us all.
Yes. But, But since then, we picked up like nothing had, time had never went by. And like I said, they're super warm, inviting people. They're top-notch people. Everybody in Fugazi, and it's like the lyrics in this song or the lyrics in Suggestion just illustrate, they are thinking about others as much as they're thinking about themselves. They're communal, they're responsible, they're moral, and they're, not to put them on a pedestal. It's hard not to with Fugazi because they seem perfect in every way. They're human. We all have our faults. We all but they really try to work against those. And to address something you said at the beginning of the podcast about a female voice replying to some of these songs. Fugazi felt it was important as to use their white male privilege to spotlight problems, created by white males. And I think really to make things change for the better, it's going to take people who are in positions of privilege to speak out, counter to their own privilege, to call people out on things. And I think, right now what's going on in our country, speaking in June of 2020, with all the situations going on, it's time for people who have a conscience, who have a moral feeling about the way this country is. We need to speak out. We need to be making our voices heard. We need change. In the Instrument, there's a line where Ghee talks about, I think it was in the Instrument, maybe I read it somewhere else, but Ghee talks about protest music had been around for 30 years and things hadn't really changed. And, here we are in 2020 and we're fighting the same battles that people were fighting in 1963 and 1968. We should not be making that same fight again. It's time for people to do something. And in Kentucky, we're one of the frontline places. I mean, and so, even though I live in a fairly rural, normal, sedate kind of place, it's important that, where we are, we make a stand for what's, right and just.
Yeah, well, that's all very well said, and I'm there with you, and I hope our listeners are too. That said about protest music, I think it might not seem often that it does anything in the moment, but given time, man, who knows? Like, people who grew up listening to Fugazi, who knows how that influenced their point of view for life and has created just something in the generation that is grown up now. There might be things that move in unseen ways, and that's something I hold out hope for, at least. So, listeners, I'll put the link in the show notes to James Vitatoe's band. And as for me, as always, not many plugs that I have other than that you can reach me at fugaziatoz@gmail.com. You can join the Facebook group, The Alphabetical Fugazi, say what you think about BreakIn, and please join me for the next episode when we will be discussing Brendan number 1. Until then, keep your eyes open.
This is my last picture.